From Bossier City, Louisiana, this is the Grouch and the Brainstorm. Welcome back to the Grouch and the Brainstorm. This is Mike, and I'm here tonight with Matt. Say hi, Matt.
Hello.
I'm here with Jill.
Hello.
Say hi, Jill.
Oh, hi.
Oh, that was my cue. No, just a joke. And it's just us tonight. Everybody else has a busy Friday night planned, apparently. This has been a rough week for most of us, except for Jill, who has been at the beach, the ocean.
That's right.
Enjoying the finer things in life, while Matt's out on the field cutting grass and
Enjoying the not finer things of life, you know.
And I'm just going long hours without sleep doing inventory. So
There you go.
Yeah. And apparently the other two were just so wore out they couldn't even come.
They couldn't. Bless their hearts.
Yeah. So I'm going to start off tonight by talking about the email line that you can always reach us out. That is gnbbosier@gmail.com. Haven't got one email yet. Would love to get one, though, if you want it mentioned on the air. And we have a telephone number, which is area code 985-377-4816. You can call and leave a voicemail. No one is going to answer that phone. That is a work phone for me, and I do not answer that phone if someone calls. But we will take the voicemail. If you want it played, we will play it on the air. We can even do that. We have that kind of technology going on. So, with everybody being back with Jill being back, this is our first episode in a couple episodes to be able to be back with us. So we're glad to have her back. And we are going to dive off into the fourth step. And I think that, I got a couple of responses this week. And I just realized this week that on our Spotify feed, you can actually have a Q&A with our listeners. And so we had a couple of people hit the Q&A, some way to goes for old Hayden. And Lisa had a way to go on there too,
Cool.
People that liked her story. And then I got some text message feedback from Judy, my friend Judy, and a shout out to Judy and Larry out there. But I got some text message feedback from her on Dickie T's story. And so I shared that with Dickie T, and man, Dickie T was overwhelmed with joy to hear that, to the point where she actually listened to her own story for the first time.
Yeah.
And then I heard about that today. So appreciate any interaction we can get. It's going to be a slow week for the next couple weeks. I will be out of town, so probably will not release an episode next week. But, some way or shape or form, it may end up happening anyway, depending on what my schedule over the next 24 hours looks like. But tonight we're going to dive off into the actual fourth step. So, Matt, Jill, are y'all ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do some good stuff, man.
Go.
After the conversation we just had, we probably all need another fourth step.
I did probably need to do all 12.
So
Start at the beginning.
before we get off into the actual fourth step, so, and the big book says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. And it talks about the inventory, right? Before we get off into that, how often have you taken a fourth step, Matt?
One time.
Okay.
One time.
One legitimate time. Mm-hmm. Jill?
5, 6, 7 is
Okay.
been quite a few.
Your own fourth step.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm
And
just,
let me preface that by saying
some are sicker than others.
No.
Wait.
No. There have been issues that have come up in sobriety that have been one particular thing that we have done, but it hasn't been sit down and make a standard
Yeah.
4 step. So
I've been through steps like multiple.
I know everybody's shocked that I would have to go back and do some more character defects. I know everybody out there knows.
Cured, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're well enough to do a podcast, you shouldn't need a fourth step.
Exactly.
I think we all need a fourth step on a regular basis, kind of like it says in the book, a business that needs a regular inventory. So another question here. How many parts to the fourth step?
How many parts?
How many parts?
What, 4? 4?
Do you know them?
Sex, resentments, harms, one other. Fear.
There you go. There you go.
Thanks,
As
Jill Mouth.
And it's very interesting that
Mike
Matt
always puts
started
me
off
on the
with
spot
sex.
with this.
Yeah.
Well, the one
Surprise.
we talk about the most is resentments.
Yeah.
The resentments
Yeah.
being the number one offender in AA, or in alcoholism. Period. Resentments seem to be the number one offender. So that's where we usually talk about. So, obviously, the listeners out there have sponsors. I hope. And so we're going to share our experience with the 4-step, not tell you how to do a 4-step. That is between you and your sponsor. Sure don't want to lose listeners because someone's sponsor found out that's how you should. That's not how that works, right? But we've all taken them. I've taken 2 really good 4-steps, and one here many years ago and one in New Orleans probably about 2 years ago, both of which were very needed. And my second 4-step at 10 years was probably about 5 years overdue. Probably should have
See,
taken
and you
that.
said that, and I just came up on 5 years, and I've been talking to Bobby, and I'm like, I just want to go back through the steps. And then you saying that, I'm like, yeah, I feel like it's.
Do it. I mean, I wanted
Yeah.
another spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm just like, I think just
Well, a personal house cleaning, a confession,
Yeah.
if you would. And that we'll get off into the 5th step when it's time for the 5th step, right? So that's where the confession would be. But the personal house cleaning and making a list of my resentments, it really helps to have a sponsor when you do this. I went into my very first 4th step, and that's what we're going to talk about, the first part of it, which is resentments, right? So in the big book, it says that we set out to find... I do not want to do this without reading it. I don't want to paraphrase. So we set out to find the flaws in our makeup which have caused us problems. And then how do we do that? We take a personal house cleaning. And then it says that resentment's the number one offender. So we get our resentments and we look at them on paper. Now, how you do that, completely between you and your sponsor. I do it straight out of the big book. That's just... It's easier for me just to go straight out of the big book. Some people have a workbook, like they get it from a central office or a treatment center. I would imagine it's the thought that goes into it, the amount of detail writing, and taking that good, hard look at yourself, right? So, I with my guys and the ones I work with, I have them go ahead and we write down flaws in our makeup, and then we just turn the page. We'll go back to that last, right? And then I have them do 3 columns, straight out of the big book. I'm resentful at, the cause, and how it affects me, right? And that way they can go back and look at those 3 columns and go, wow, this world really has dominated me. These people really have dominated me. And, and I'm going to add one more thing to that, because I want you guys, obviously I need your input. I surely ain't a professional. But the one thing I would like to add is we list people, institutions, and principles. That's what it says in the big book, right? So a lot of times in my mind, I'm only thinking of people that I resent, right? But that's institution and principles is a big part of the 4-step, and I'll give an example, right? The very first time I did a 4-step, I only listed people. Never once did I list one of my biggest resentments. And I'll say it on air. I'm sure it won't get too far, but the IRS, right? That was a resentment of mine, and why? Well, because they want my money, and it affects my pocketbook, I mean, just look, my hard-earned money and all that stuff, it goes in. But that was an institution, and if that's bothering me, I should have listed it on there, right? And so that's and that's just my example of what I could bring to the table on this particular part of this particular step. But we hear in meetings the dreaded 4-step. I don't know about that. I was so nervous going into my 4-step, and realistically, I think a lot of that is chatter, scuttlebutt throughout the rooms of AA. It's very important just to do it. Just to get this stuff on paper. The first time may not be as much as the second or the third or whatever. And you can always think of something later. But start on it because you have momentum up until step 4. You have some really good momentum. Going through the book, reading, and then you hit step 4, and they're like, I'll see you in a month and a half when I finish writing all this stuff. And I could have wrote it all in a day. I could have wrote it all in 6 hours. So, and that's my take on the first part of step 4. What you guys got?
The first part. Typically what I wanted to mention, if I'm working with my sponsees, is I print it off the internet. They have already, the sheets made and you can just fill them out and all. My fourth step, I barely can remember it. It was a while ago, and I was in treatment, and it took a while for all that information to make sense to me in my head. I could name all these people and things that I resented, but wait, I have a part in that? And that didn't make any sense. Like, it really took, my that one lady, like, really explaining that to me, because I was like, they did this and I'm mad. Makes sense. But that took a while for me to see how, why was I still holding on to this? And that was an interesting part. Of course, going through the fears, the resentments, and all of that, and the people I've harmed. I had a lot of fears and resentments, a lot of them. I didn't have many of the other two, but to be honest with you, I think those were the two things I struggled with the most.
Is the resentments?
Resentments and the fears.
Resentments and fears. Okay. What about you, man?
Yeah, mine was probably resentments the most. I had just a list of everybody. I've been keeping that thing forever, and and then you have to play out, that down the road you go with that, and you realize, it was me in every one of these. But that was probably my biggest. I'm kind of thinking back on it, but for sure resentments were, because I still deal with that today, and I have to make sure, am I getting a resentment? Is this that big of a deal? So it's still a problem.
I felt like I didn't even have any resentments. I really did. When I came in, I felt like there were none, like zero.
Oh, is that like denial-ish? Or
looking back on it, maybe a little bit of denial, maybe just not paying attention.
Okay.
Not understanding what a resentment really was. I think a combination of everything, really. But I just honestly thought I didn't have any resentments. I just, hey, I let everything go, water off my back. I don't, and then that's where a sponsor came in handy. He started bringing up these resentments, and I was like, oh. But here's the thing. He said, I want you to think back to when you were a kid, earliest you can, right? Is there anything back there that just really jolts you? And I brought up something, and I was like, but I was 5. I was 5 years old. He goes, but it still bothers you.
You're still thinking about it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what my sponsor said.
You're still thinking about it. And so in my head, I want to go ahead and jump ahead to my part, because that's what everybody keeps talking about. And I'm thinking it's not a resentment if I don't have a part in it. That's what I'm thinking, right? Because I know I've got to eventually write my part in it. So, of course, I'm going to minimize. And second, I'm thinking I had no part in it. I'm not going to list it. And that's not what this step is for. This step is for listing our resentments, right? We'll get to our part whenever we get to that 4th column. And eventually in AA, we kind of learn to live in the 4th column of the 4th step. We kind of learn to look at our part in almost everything. And that's where this is leading to. I hate to, be a, character, break the code. I hate to break the code, but realistically, but I didn't think I had none. And he took me back to then, and, we started working our way north of in age-wise as far as different things that had happened. And by the time we finished, we had a nice little list of resentments, and how they affected me. And, what the people did, how they affected me. And then, of course, when we get to our part, if it ain't our part, it might just be holding on to it. Might just,
exactly.
be my only part was holding on to it. Dale was my very first sponsor. And I'm going to tell you, when he said that, the only part you may have is just holding on to it. That person may be gone. They may be dead, may not be alive out here anymore. But you're still holding on to it, which means it's affecting you somewhere in there, right? And we walk through each one of these, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all the columns. So that part, was crucial because I didn't even know I had that in me. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and what you said earlier, and this is what I was going to say, and I'm glad that you said it. You keep saying with a sponsor, with a sponsor, get a sponsor. This is not, I don't know who's listening to this, but this is where sponsors just take you through this thing, and don't try to outthink it. And also don't make it a bigger deal than it is. Let your sponsor, I went with my list, and some of that stuff he said, some of it was a big deal that I didn't think was a big deal. That let your sponsor work through that stuff with you, and if you miss something or you leave it off, you can go back. I mean, we do that regularly.
Yeah, unless you leave it off on purpose, the world is not going to. The world's not going to stop spinning whether you leave it off on purpose or not. But unless you leave it off on purpose, that's legit.
But as long as I've been, like I say that, like I've been in here a million years, but coming in here and working with people and seeing people coming in and out of the rooms for whatever reason. Well, I know why, but the 4th step is where people just hit the brakes.
Well, we lose some momentum.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that. I never really thought about it like that.
I've really never understood why. I mean, it didn't scare me. At that point in my life, I was so desperate and ready to change that I was like, and it didn't take me long. It just took a couple of hours. I mean, everything, all the resentments I was able to put down really quickly, and the resentments. It didn't take me long. But some people, like they say, will balk at this kind of stuff. And I was ready.
But I mean, like you say balk. I mean, like I've seen like terror in people's eyes, and they've read enough to go, okay, now I know where we're going with this. And I try to make the smallest deal out of it. Like, okay, now we're moving on to 4. It's like truck brakes,
Yeah.
And
that's what I'm saying. Like, I just don't, like, why? I don't know. I that's one thing I wasn't scared of.
But I was also, one, I didn't want to do it, but then I did want to do it and be very thorough.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to get everything and get this done, and I don't want to have to do it again. Well, I'll still do it, and so.
I think thinking back to when I first did it, I probably was so eager to be like, these people piss me off.
Yeah.
And this is why I have resentments.
Yeah. That's what I did.
Because like I was like, I have a part in that?
Yeah.
Because like whoever my temporary sponsor didn't explain to me really how to do that last part. And so I came with it uncompleted, and then we talked about it, and I was like, oh. Well,
yeah,
rude.
Yeah, yeah. Who made this about me?
Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was I was kind of like that. I mean, it was like I've got all this stuff. The world's out to get me, and then I figured out why the world was out to get me.
Yeah, you do realize a lot of character
defects
defects whenever just in the resentment part of this. You realize a lot of character defects, and that's the purpose of the first 3 columns right here in the big book. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, right? So there are some of those out there that are spiritually sick, right? So we have to look at that as well. We looking at this list and we're going, man, they have really wronged us. These people, we're burned up. We're sore. I think they use the term sore.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't mean the same anymore, really. Usually when we're sore, it's because we've been exercising too much. But, these people were sore. But these resentments can be grave, right? And it says that in the big book as well. So, but in the big book, and I'm going to refer to the big book a lot because I really don't want to screw this up with Mike's version of anything, right? It talks about we turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. And we turn back to the list we wrote, the 3 columns. with the names, the action, and how it affected us, because it held the key to the future. Well, the key to the future is our part, right? And that's whenever we have to look at it, because the power these folks have over us is what this is saying. These people have power over us. The power they have over us can actually be fatal to us.
Sure.
It can cause us to go back out there and do it. If drinking is the number one offender, which I believe the big book, the
resentment, you mean?
Well, I believe the big book, the recipe it gives me for sobriety has worked for many years. The recipe for recovery, really. And I believe that these things... Also, I have to read this one line out of the big book. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us.
Amen.
And that is where the title of this podcast, or the title of the podcast comes from, is from that sentence right there. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. And brainstorm back then was a little bit different. We talked about that in episode 2 or 3. This is where you go back and re-listen to some episodes if you want to hear that part of it. But so that is the resentment part of it, right? And then there's the prayer. This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. Have you ever had to say it, Matt?
Sure. Did it a few weeks ago, basically. Yeah. Just now I've learned to go, something's going on with this person that I'm having an issue with. And maybe it's something I've done that I can correct. And a lot of times it is. And that I've learned to try to look at that as best I can. But sometimes people, we expect everybody to be tolerant with us, and, I'm dealing with so much stuff. Well, everybody deals with stuff. They don't always handle it perfect. And so when you can take that minute and go, let me just pray for the person, breathe for a second. And you go, maybe something's going on, and a lot of times it is. And that situation, literally a few weeks ago, that happened. And I was so irritated, I pulled over on the side of the road and got out and walked through the grass. And there was a guy with me, and he goes, what are you doing? I said, you stay in the truck. I'll be back in a minute. And I just walked off.
Was you irritated with him?
No, it was with someone else on the phone while I was in the truck with this person. And the guy, I know he thought I was crazy. I didn't really care. And got back in the truck, and I was not. It was better. But by the following day, the person that I prayed for called me and apologized and said, dealing with a lot, and went into what he was dealing with. And he said, I kind of overloaded there. And I said, it's fine. I understand. And it never became a big issue.
You didn't say, it's fine. I understand. You're a sick man.
Yeah. Well, I didn't throw that out there.
I need to treat you like a sick man.
But when that kind of thing happens, and then it's kind of reaffirmed, like, hey man, something's probably going on, instead of just taking everything so personal. So,
yeah. Well, that might be the first glimpse of a pause.
Sure.
We'll talk about, I'm sure, in a future episode, the pause. Hell, we could probably have a whole episode just on the pause itself.
Yep.
Yeah, and for me, that's been with the anger, that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. That's where we stopped. I stopped the anger from going to 100 and just going, furniture moving and tearing a building down. It's like I've got to stop that before it gets going. And usually you pray. It's a good way to defuse a lot of it. It may not do it all, but it'll at least calm you down in the moment.
Yeah.
So if you can get through those first few moments of that, usually you'll be all right. But,
yeah. I think the beautiful thing about step 4 is learning that you can look at all this stuff from a different perspective. And I think that's the whole point of it. Like, you may think this certain way, but it doesn't have to be that way. I want you to look at it in a whole different perspective.
And I'll quote my sponsor on this, okay? And I'll just say a general one from my 4th step, and then we go to 5th step. So resentments, and I have both my parents on there, and they're probably listening to this, and they already know they were on there because I've already told them. And my sponsor, this is a quote, and I read off this dramatic resentment. And he looks at me and he goes, hey, man, did you get to eat when you were a kid? Did you have food on the table? And I said, yeah. And he goes, did you have lights on at your house? And I said, yes, sir. He goes, did you go to school every day? Yes, sir. He said, your parents took you to church every Sunday? I said, yeah. He goes, then what the heck is wrong with you? He goes, you had it better than about 99% of the world. He's like, get over it, dude. And I was like, you're right.
Yeah.
He goes, did you ever think that maybe your parents were doing the best they could do? And I went, not really. I've always just blamed them for everything.
That's
you know?
exactly the
Bobby
same with
E
me.
right there, baby.
Parents take a beating. I'm gonna tell you,
Yeah.
I had an epiphany when it comes to my parents one time, and I was about to go. I was about to go on stage and do a talk for some event we had going, and I remember telling a guy at the club, and this guy's been sober since '86 or '96. It's been a long time, you know. But I remember telling him, you know, that I was talking about my father, you know, and how much I love my father. And I said, and I don't think in all these years, I think at the time I was 46 or 44. I said, I don't think in all these years that my dad's ever told me he was proud of me. And he looked at me and he said, have you ever told your dad you're proud of him? And I thought, well, I'll be damned. You know, that is no, I haven't.
Yeah.
That perspective again.
Yes, it's looking at it from a whole nother angle.
You're
You know,
like, damn.
proud of me for what? You know,
And you know what?
you destroyed more families than I have. Son.
We talk about resentments, but it always comes back to me. It always comes back to ego. And I am not the center of attention. Why do I think I need to be the center of everyone's drama? You know, everyone hates. Why is that? That's, to me, is just killing that.
Exactly. We want to make it about us.
Right. And that's what everything, for me personally, that's what I keep running into is like,
Me?
yeah, me. I'm going, why, you know, I mean, I raise kids. And like he brought up with me, he goes, how was you as a dad compared to your parents? And I went, oh, it was horrible. You know?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, exactly. So you're on here with this big long list. He goes, make one about yourself, you know? And I was like, yeah, you're right. So,
Yeah, that was huge with the parents.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
They were doing the best they could with what
poor,
they
poor
had.
parents take a beating when
Yeah,
we
they
first
do.
get to AA, don't they?
And I mean, I don't know, you know, I mean, you have to, it's just changed my whole attitude though.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's changed my whole attitude. I saw my mom last weekend and, you know, it's better than it's ever been with both of them. And, you know, I love it. So.
Well, I'm sure I could be a better son than I am now, but the relationship does no longer centers around some of the craziness that it did before. You know, I've said this, when I got sober, I thought bad stuff would stop happening, you know, and the truth is the bad stuff still happens. The crazy stuff has stopped.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it just, the craziness has come to a halt, but the bad stuff, it's just part of life.
And think about now that I have younger kids, but my two older ones are grown. They're out of the house. One of them's in the Army. He's living his best life. Okay. He's doing that thing. He's 21, 22. He's having a good time, single. He's enjoying life, you know. And I have a daughter who's raising my first grandkid and she's doing great. But I think about how I worried my parents, and even as an adult, especially as an adult, how much worry and stuff that I caused them that they probably never said anything to me about, because I would be in the same boat with my kids, you know,
Yeah.
regardless of how old they were.
Yeah.
And so.
And it's fun to watch them start raising kids when you get to that age.
Look.
You're like, I hope they give you everything.
Oh, and my daughter, Caden, he's going to give her every bit back that she gave her old dad. So he's all
Circle of
over
life, baby. Circle of life. Right there.
it is. So
Future fourth step right there.
well, he is a handful, and she has got her hands full with him. But it's nice to see. You know, I'm glad I'm around to see it.
So we've sat down at a place and we've written down the 3 columns, right? Who we were resentful at. So we got some names, what they did, the actions, right? And how it affected me, right? This is how their actions affected me. And that's where we're at, right? In the very first part of the 4th step. And then in this, I'm going to read out of the big book here for just a second. It says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, We resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. All right. Yeah. Yeah. How do you do that? That's tough, right?
Mind blown.
Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's or woman's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. Apparently, they only had one color ink back in the day. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to make these matters straight. Oh, that paragraph right there, it tells me what to do. It even tells me what questions to ask myself, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just say I have a resentment against Matt. And it was because he, flung a rock under the lawnmower and it hit my car, right? And it caused me issues, whatever these issues would be. Well, when I take that, I look at that name, and then I go back and I start on my fourth column. And I say, Matt, man, he's burning me up. So I have to ask myself, where have I been selfish? Well, I'm only thinking about my car. Matt didn't know there was a rock there. Where have I been dishonest? Yeah. Well, I told the insurance company it was a boulder, Where have I been where have I been self-seeking? Right? It's more than about just my car. This is about this is more of about a feeling than it is about a fact. And where have I been frightened? Well, I'm worried people are going to see my car with a dent in it. Talk about ego. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep. I need to go check my car right quick, guys. And those, in all seriousness, though a situation had not been entirely my fault, I have to disregard Matt entirely. So what character defects are causing me to feel this way about Matt? And those are the questions that I'm asking myself in the dreaded fourth column. Me, when I'm working with my guys. So these are the things I have them write down. So you see that one paragraph and how crucial it is.
Sure.
And I get to look at my part on it. Now, we move on to the second part, or the next part. We ain't got to number them. We move on to the next part, and we notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mrs. Brown and Miss Jones, two people that are actually listed in this, an employer. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It's an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to be more trouble. So we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though there was no resentment in connection, and we ask ourselves why we had the fear. So now we're on fear, right? We're talking about fears. So not your fears, right? We're just talking about fears in general. I mean, if you want to give me some of your fears, that's great. I'll take all the fears I can get, right? But for me, I'm not talking about the fear of spiders. I'm not talking about the fear of snakes, right? I'm talking about real fears that emotionally cripple. And not to discount those folks who get emotionally disturbed by snakes and spiders. I'm not discounting that. If that's a real deal, have at it. What I'm talking about is the things that might be eating my lunch on a regular basis, right? So, the fear of being alone has been a huge one that I've heard over the years from many, many people, just the fear of being alone, right? And that would be something that if someone lets that, next episode, we're going to talk about natural instincts, right? That's going to be the topic is natural instincts, and we all have them. We got to eat. We got to have a roof over our head. We got to have food. Some of us more than others, right? This minute, we got to have. But so we'll talk about the natural instincts, but that's going to be a great topic, I think, for a lot of us because the natural instincts are different. But when we look at fear and we write those down on paper, when I do, right? And I still do this, by the way. I write them in my iPad now. But when I write them down on paper, I kind of look back at them and go, this is, I'm either thinking about the future and I'm not good enough to figure out, hell, I ain't good enough to figure out today, So, the future is not something that I'm going to be able to figure out. And then some of them are just silly. You know, some of them are absolute fear of the unknown. Well, to me, that's just fear of fear.
Yeah.
I'm just scared that I'm going to be scared, right? So how has this helped me? I've learned that prior to coming to AA, I didn't do much as far as getting out there and doing what a human being can do, right? I drank, I worked, I slept. You know, somewhere in there, had a couple kids, got married a few times. Thought I was contributing to society. I thought I was doing something, right? But the truth is, what kept me from getting out there was fear. Fear of people, fear of economic stability, fear of all kind of stuff kept me from starting a podcast. It didn't exist back then, but that's an example. Fear, you know, kept me from getting on an airplane and flying anywhere I wanted to go. It kept me from a lot of stuff. It kept me from me. It kept me from being me. So that evil and corroding thread, this is a very important part of this. And sometimes we actually skip this step entirely, this part of this step. And this is a very important part, the fear part. So what do you think about the fear part, Matt?
Well, I think it's funny, like, going to that too, is like, I think it does come down to control, and we want to control, and it's constant fighting over control. So I was talking with a dude the other day, and he's not in a program, but he's trying to go out and date and stuff like that, right? And he's like, well, I just don't want to ask a girl out, you know, because it may not work out. And I'm like, so you're scared of dating someone and then it not working out. It's not working out now. You know, you're not dating anyone. So, you know, you're projecting this fear of a result that you don't know what would happen, you know? And I just thought about that later, and I was like, that's kind of how we are, is like, we're just inventing, or I'm just inventing results, and it comes back to control. And I go, well, I'm scared this might happen. Well, my fears are directly in relation to how I am spiritually. So I'm pretty chill most of the time when I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and I'm spiritually in touch with God. But when I get away from that, I can it's instant go to these weird thoughts, and I have to go, wait a minute, what are you doing? Like, it's just uncanny. And it, again, this goes back to a sponsor, and I keep saying this whole time. This is where you sit down with someone as you go through this and let someone show you, hey, this is what's really going on here. I was kind of blinded to that the whole way through, you know, and then but this is the step where I really started getting better. And I went, oh, I notice a change now. Things are changing for the better. And there was a fear of doing the 4th step, for that matter. But
and how come?
Because I didn't want to tell someone. I was really, I guess, scared of 5 too, but I knew that was coming. But I didn't want to tell myself, and I really didn't want to tell God, and I didn't want to tell anybody else any of this stuff. And there was a lot of them, and it was told to me there needs to be a lot of them, and there was an example of how many there should be for each column. And so, yeah, you know, you go back to 5 years old, 7 years old, and you think, oh, that's crazy. You know, you're 38. Why are you worried about that? And then I've been a part of some of those, and it's 5 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old.
It's just steadily through your life.
Yeah. And other people deal with that same thing. And, but I noticed a weight of writing that down. And I was, so at the time I was married, had 3 kids at home, and one of them was real little. And so I couldn't focus, and it was a little house, and it just got out of treatment. And so I would take it to a park over here in Bossier and sit and do it. And it took me a while, and some of it was dread, fear of doing it. But it gave me some time to just sit and think about it. And it did take me a while. But yeah, that became the change for me. Like, I noticed it was just a noticeable, I don't know if it was a relief or what it was, but yeah, it was a game changer. So from then on out, it was cruising then, so
Nice.
Yeah.
it was. I mean,
My fears were horrifying, and I didn't believe they would ever go away. And because they hadn't, and I'd been experienced these. When I say these, I say panic attacks. I was scared to death I'd had another one of those. And to me, to have another one of those, I wouldn't make it because I don't have a substance to make it go away. The thing is, I haven't had a panic attack since I've gotten sober, which is, to me, one of the biggest miracles. But
Like 13 years. Right? 13 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's amazing to me, and they crippled me. They absolutely paralyzed me to the point like all I did was sedate myself and just try to make something out of life with that, and a lot of other things. And the thing is, with fears, like the opposite of fear, which I was just talking about tonight in the meeting, is trust. And at that point in my life, I didn't trust anything. I just didn't. I felt like I'd been, let down by everything. I was never taught that I needed to trust or believe in a higher power or anything of that nature. So, I mean, what do I have to trust? I knew I couldn't trust me. So I think that's why I had panic attacks for so long, and why I felt so lost and just crazy is I lived in fear, and I feared everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would be driving. Sometimes it'd be sitting in a theater. If things got too overwhelming, I'd have a damn panic attack.
Yeah.
It just, and so I never thought that would end. I thought that's just like, it was what it was, and I would live with those for the rest of my life. But, I didn't have a problem listing all of those because I had so many of them. And, but I just, by that point, I had just conceded to the fact that wasn't going to change. And that scared me because I knew I wouldn't be able to handle life if it didn't.
Yeah. No, I get it. I was, and we'll talk a little bit more on fear, and then we'll move on to the next part, which is sex. Yeah. We're going to have to talk about it, guys. So go ahead and get ready, Matt.
Let's talk about, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
That's a couple hour deal.
Well, we're going to have to put it into about a 15-minute segment. Don't go bragging over
Cliff
there,
notes
Matt.
on that. You said we go back how young? 7, 8 years old?
7 seconds later, Matt's done.
Hey, I will say this before we get off here too.
We're not going to get off of it just yet, but go ahead, bud.
Well, I heard a song the other day, and this guy sent me, or somebody sent me this, this guy wrote, and it was a poem about fear. And he's a singer, pretty popular guy. But one of the lines in the song in the poem I loved, and it said, "I will not fear tomorrow, for I feel as though today has been enough." And I was like, if that's not recovery, I don't know what is. So, and that's what I do today. I just try not to
I had
project.
I had some fears, and I'm not going to classify these with the spiders and bugs and airplanes and stuff like that. And those are real fears. I get that. I had some fears. I feared the end of the world. Major. I'm talking about crippling, keeping me inside fears. I feared Jesus coming back. That was a huge one. The thought process went through my head all day, every day. Am I going to get left? That really was part of my life. I would see certain things on the news and be completely consumed with fear for months. And I had to stay away from news. And it just so happens, at school, we had to bring current events, out of the newspaper. We had to clip current events. And, back then, you got to remember the 80s and Cold War and all the stuff that was going on. And some of the current events had to do with, the United States relationship with Russia and nuclear this, that, and the other. And, man, I heard the word nuclear reactor, and I didn't know what. I'd get freeze. I would freeze with fear. I'd get a hot feeling up my back, And a lot of this did stem from having a very religious upbringing. I get that, But the reason I bring up any of this is for the simple fact that earlier tonight we talked about that first drink, right? my first drink. I told you guys about the first time I ever drank. It was a conversation we had off air. And the time when I took that first drink, I was 14, every single fear that I had completely vanished. Mm-hmm. Every fear. I'm talking about, I didn't care about the end of the world. It didn't matter to me about, rejection. I mean, for some reason, when you get some, whatever it is in your system, it's, well, I'll just move on to the next one if this one rejects me. You know what I mean? And
sure.
So there was absolutely zero fear, and then I come off of that and I realize that I have a solution to my fear problem. And hence many, many years, and that's not the only reason, right? But many years of pushing those fears to the side. So whenever I got to this step with my first sponsor, obviously I had to I felt kind of silly being a 38-year-old man sitting across from I think at the time he was only a few years older than me, maybe 55, 56, and sitting across from him though and telling him, these are real fears for me. Like this is, even to this day, I used to, and I've been sober for a little while and I don't have those fears anymore. And it obviously they didn't stem from wrong living because I was a pretty good kid. I did exactly what I was told most of the time. And so those were real. And so it helps to have conversations like we're having right now with a sponsor. So you can talk through them, identify them, and they're there on paper, and the ones that may look silly may not look silly when you're finished, And then after you start sponsoring people, well, it really kicks in.
Yeah.
So do y'all sponsor?
Yes.
When you do your 4-step, you've got your 4-step, you have somebody sitting down to do 4 and 5. Do you ever share one of yours with them as a kind of a icebreaker type thing or as a relatable type thing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jinx. No, absolutely. Matter of fact, especially if they're having a hard time coming up with something, right? Number one, I don't want them to think anything they say is going to be silly.
Right.
I mean,
it's a reassurance to go, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to hear their fears, what they think are fears. And then as we move past sometimes they're it's hard for me to call someone else's fears small whenever they've, it's obviously affecting them emotionally. So I don't want to mean small fear, but after we've moved past the bugs and the spiders and snakes and stuff like that, we move into some of the more women, hey,
Oh.
move into the, have you heard my story? Move into the deeper fears, that kind of can control us. Does that make sense? Control, because fear can control me.
Oh, yeah.
It really can. It will keep me from making a decision at all.
Here's the fun part of all that though, and this is where so I have a Al-Anon friend, and that's interesting. But we've got into this discussion a little bit. That's a different way of looking at it, that I've never been exposed to. But what do you have these fears all your life, so you grow up with all this stuff in your head. What happens when you get rid of it? It's been your thing your whole life. What do you do then?
You refocus that energy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You breathe for the first time.
Yeah, and you go, well, I just don't. It's like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands, And you're like, yeah, I mean, it is like I'm 5 years into this, and 4 of those years I've been fighting through the crap from the. And like I saw somebody the other day I hadn't seen in a while, and they're like, dude, you're like so relaxed. And I'm like, I know, man, like I can see where I'm going. And is it perfect? No. But oh my goodness, it's so much better now. And
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, but you learn to go, like I sit there and I go, wait a minute. I just figured out I don't like being around a crowd of people all the time. Like I don't have to have, like I learned that I actually myself, I like different things than I thought I did my whole life, and it's kind of cool.
It's nice.
The things you thought interested you when you got into the rooms, I can't say you, the things that I thought interested me when I got into the rooms just really don't interest me at all now.
I will say a cool moment. So I got an uncle that I won't say he didn't go to a program or anything like that, but very young, realized drinking was going to be a problem, and he just stopped. He doesn't drink. Never has as long as I've known him. I was not even born when, he quit, but probably hadn't had a drink in 50 years. He used to take me fishing when I was younger. My dad worked a lot. He took me all the time. He had a bass boat, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it was so cool that he would take me. And, my dad didn't have a boat or anything like that. So I go off and I just do my wild self, as an adult and a teenager. And I kind of get away from doing stuff like that. And my cousin, his daughter, got married in New Orleans about 2 years ago. And come to find out, the guy that's my sponsor and him know each other very well from back in the day. And so I get back and get sober, and my sponsor goes, "Do you fish?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't really in years." And so that's where we kind of do our step work, and we do that kind of stuff. But I got back into that, and I remember how much I loved it. Well, my cousin got married in New Orleans. It was a beautiful wedding. It's his oldest daughter. And I was getting ready to go that morning. We were leaving from the wedding, and I was by myself, and I was going out to the truck, real nice hotel, and I'm pulled up in front of the front door. And I was like, I want to say something to him, but they had so much going on. And I turned around, and he's standing there. That morning, Sunday morning, he's just standing there. He came out to tell me bye. And I got to look at him and go, "Hey, man, like something that you taught me or allowed me to learn to love when I was a kid has helped me now later in life. And it's given me an outlet to, and, yeah. And like, I just figured out, hey man, this is what you used to do before all that stuff, and, so I'm loving life today. I guess is the point.
Yeah. And because we did all this stuff, and we continue to do a lot of it. So
sure.
Now let's talk about sex.
Wasn't that a song? Let's talk about
Salt
sex.
and Pepper,
There
I
you
believe.
go.
I may be off by a few years, but I think it was Salt and Pepper. And we're not gonna, for the sake of people turning us off right now and not listening to us.
No details.
Well, we're not going to talk about anything. We're not going to talk about the physical act. Okay, we're going to talk about conduct, relationships, and generally that's what I look at whenever I'm visiting with my guys. Is it's not about the actual act; it's about relationships. And I'm going to read the book, because that's where the instruction manual comes from. We reviewed our own conduct over the years. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So what I have my guys do is relationships, right? Start with one, and this really helped me, okay? I mean, it didn't help me turn into the Don Juan that I am today.
Well,
that's not what I mean.
Of course.
It helped me understand me a little better, right? It helped me understand some things that I don't do right in this category at all. And so I took a relationship, just pick one, wrote it down, and ask myself each one of these questions about that relationship. And I'll kind of take a little bit from that fourth column back there where I try to disregard the other person entirely, but in this particular relationship, where had I been selfish? Where had I been dishonest? Where had I been inconsiderate? And I tell my guys, even though the question is listed in one sentence, ask a question for each individual category, right? It's not one big thing. And, and then we review that thoroughly and we get it down on paper. Did any of y'all do that part of it?
No.
No?
No. I didn't have anything to put down.
On sex?
No, I didn't.
Well, I mean...
I'm not in denial of anything.
No,
But it like Mike said, though, and I think a lot of people, too, and I get this with 4 steps, people want to come in and go, what I did was I told this guy this, and then he told me that, so then... And it's like, no, you're a liar, you're a cheater, you're a thief, whatever the broad term for that is. And so this is also one that I think people fear because they think they have to start off with these great details. And it's like, no, you're selfish. You lied. You cheated, whatever it was, just in a general way. So, and I guess including when you say sex too, just as far as your person, whether you're married or whatever that might be, you can be selfish without it being a sex act, And so, yeah, there was a ton of that, and just and being married for a while. I mean, and it kind of evolves and it gets worse.
No, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Or did for me,
I haven't had many long-term relationships, and I've never been married.
And it becomes a selfish, like, oh, well, you.
Well, unfortunately,
Mike and I can do probably a separate podcast.
Yeah,
If you hear him laughing right now, we're both.
I was just you can't help but think about your own conduct even in doing a podcast. You can't help but think about your own conduct whenever you're helping another sponsor, helping a sponsee look at their conduct. You can't help but think about some of the stuff you did, right? And the whole point is to mold a future life or a future relationship life. Jerry E. down in Mandeville, he had you write down on, he never did this to me, but he talked to me about it one time, and you write down on a piece of paper what you want, tell your person, whoever you're working with, write down on a piece of paper exactly what you want out of a relationship from the other person. What do you want? And you can list all these things, right? Maybe 100 things. And then they show you the paper, the sponsor or whatever, and then they turn the paper back on you and say, okay, can you be all of this?
Yeah.
And when I think about that, it I don't want to say goosebumps because it's not quite the goosebump category, but it does trigger something in my head that says, man, wow. Now I understand why it's called an inventory.
Sure.
So that's a crucial part of it too. I have done it. I've done that twice, and I still do it. I still look back on it. And my story with this is I did this, right? I did the whole 4-step again at year 10, and we sat down at this table and we start talking and writing at the same time. And I'm talking and I'm writing, I'm telling this, that, and the other. And I've been in AA for 10 years. So I'm still acting like a newcomer, trying to, but in my head I'm trying to sort out my part in some of these things and trying to not talk about the other person and trying to play the perfect student, and we're really not getting anywhere. And he's asking me why. He keeps asking me why. Oh, my goodness gracious, 100 times. Why? Well, we're going to talk about natural instincts next week, right? Or the next episode. It's going to be 2 weeks from now, so everybody listening knows. But we actually, me and him together, tracked down a specific incident where the action that I took could have very well have affected the rest of my life. Okay? And it wasn't nothing drastic. It wasn't nothing tragic. It wasn't one of these things that people are arrested for or you see on the news, right? It wasn't anything like that, but yet it affected my entire life. And I was 48 years old, and whenever we did this, 47, somewhere in there. And that happened when I was 17. And we ended up tracking it all the way back to that point because of the looking at the inventory and the part, that has a natural instinct. So next week, or 2 weeks from now, sorry, we're gonna look, actually, I'm gonna dive off into the 12 and 12 a little bit when we talk about natural instincts. And we're going to talk about how they can be good, how they can be bad, how they affect us, and more so how the overuse of the natural instincts can harm us from a relationship standpoint to an addiction standpoint, which kind of all comes together whenever you do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, to the listeners out there, I'd love to give shout outs. Judy and Larry, love hearing from you guys. My prayers are with you both. Amy C. down in Lacombe, always glad she's listening to us. Jane R., who is a regular listener. Miss Faye, who's been on the show once, and she's a great listener. Michelle.
And just celebrated 3 years, Miss Faye did.
Yeah, sure did.
A few days ago.
Rhonda and Kim, they still listen to us and leave comments. And we also are hoping to get a bonus episode in pretty soon with Drew.
The man, the myth, the legend.
The legend.
Right.
Y'all have heard nothing till we get this guy on here. He's awesome.
Drew is Drew.
He's one of a kind.
I look forward to spending some time with him, at least spending, 45 minutes to an hour with Drew. So that's going to be up and coming. Please forgive our delay. Some stuff has just gotten in the way and kept us from recording as much as we want to. But vacations are over. My trip will be over after this week, and hopefully we'll be back in the studio to record several episodes back to back to back so that we can talk about some recovery-related issues. So signing off from Bossier City, Louisiana, this is The Grouch and the Brainstorm.